Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? It's DT2. DT2 Comics Chat is my full Twitter name. Okay, and talking about sci-fi, fantasy, and comics is my game. On this episode of Sloppy Spoilers, we're going to talk about The Wheel of Time, Season 1. Got to get it right, Episode 7, The Dark Along the Ways. Okay, otherwise subtitled as We Don't Believe Nothing We Saw. So let me get my co-host on here. Welcome to David Nemesis Howard.
Yo, what's up, everybody? As you can see behind me, I've been doing a little bit of rearranging. So I got Batman and the Suicide Squad with my back, and American Gothic, Vision, Scarlet Witch looking out for me as well. So I'm ready to go.
You had me at Batman. Welcome to Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Dr. Steve?
I'm doing all right. Actually, with this particular episode, I was ready to call Fly You Fools, both because of the Moria reference and because everybody acts like a fool in this episode.
Everybody plays a fool sometimes. Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Fate, Bracy. How you doing, Bracy?
Everybody plays the fool sometimes. And yes, it does happen here.
Everybody played it this episode. I didn't believe 90% of what I saw, and that's even given the context of the show. I'm shaking my head like, no, wasn't buying it. So that's pretty much what this episode is going to be, us deciding how much of what we saw we actually bought. And for me, like I said, maybe 10%, and I'll give you the general reason why. Then I'll throw it out to my co-host. But the general reason why is because both as a writer and as a fan, when you have what are supposed to be pivotal moments, they're supposed to hit with some level of emotional punch. And we had some of the greatest, at least on paper, at least plot-wise, story moments hit in this episode, and they hit like they hit like a big old bucket of meh. I mean, it just didn't move me at all. And I'm saying to myself, how can I be this deep into this first season, and how can we be having this level of revelation and understanding? And my reaction to it is indifference at best. I'm like, something ain't right in Smallville. So this is a classic example now. I know this one is going to be a fire starter, but this is a classic example of some of the issues we sometimes have with Nolan's work, particularly Nolan's Batman, in that you get the idea on a cerebral level, but on an emotional level, it just doesn't pack a punch. And when most people watch a show, you need both. You need to get what's going on. You need to be able to work out what's going on in your mind, but you need to feel it, because that's what makes you engage with the characters in the storyline. And again, like I said, about 10% in this whole episode for me. And I was and am still amazed. I'm like, this is the penultimate episode. This is the episode before the season finale. So if you know anything about music, it should be, this is like the crescendo. This is everything's getting louder, everything's getting bigger, because there's going to be a payoff that we can't wait to see next episode. And my thing was like, is Nynaeve over? I just want to know. Do I have to watch her emo on the screen? Because I'm ready for her to be over. So anyway, each one of you give me your general impressions, and then we'll get into specifics. Because from scene 1, I was shaking my head. But we'll get there in a minute. Nim's first impression of the overall episode.
Once again, I think that we talked about the Game of Thrones aspect of this show. It also is stealing from Tolkien. This is so, but the thing that really bugs me is that the obvious Gandalf character, and we're going to get into this, I'm sure, doesn't pull the Gandalf moment. She doesn't pull the Gandalf moment. It's someone else. And it's someone who doesn't deserve. I mean, you already know. I'm getting all worked up. People out there who've seen the show know who I'm talking about. And then it just continues this way. And then that same character gets her Game of Thrones moment. I'm like, I didn't need to see that. I needed no part of that. And however, I will say this, whether it was intentional or not, I really like the design of this city, the armor, the whole culture of the monarchy. It really gave me a Conan feel for some reason. I was like, this city could live in the Conan world. It could be part of Hyperborea. So it really felt like that. So I enjoyed that part. But everything else felt either I didn't like it or it felt contrived. Like a lot of there's fortune teller stuff in this. It felt like it's just straight out of left field. It's like, here, let's do this real quick so we can advance the plot and have Rand, in particular, and I'm sure we're going to hit this, all of a sudden have these major revelations about his past. All within, I'm going to say 10 minutes of episode time. I'm like, come on now. Come on. That's just lazy writing. You're like, we're running out of episodes, and next episode we got to do whatever we're going to do. So we need to get this out of the way. It's like, no.
That's what I'm saying. The unfolding of everything and the feelings it generated just felt illegitimate. Wasn't real, wasn't earned, and we didn't care.
No.
That's not a good feeling before you final episode. Oh, studio's falling down.
Yeah.
Oh no, Suicide
Somebody else
Squad
didn't like the
committed
show
suicide.
Yeah, Suicide Squad fell down. Well, we'll put them up later.
Go ahead.
That's
Brady.
okay. You replace them with a whole new picture.
I'm going to take down Vision and Scarlet Witch before they fall too. All right. All right, ignore me. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bracy. You're up.
Don't worry, Nims. Suicide Squad's always replaceable.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I got two major problems with this particular episode. Is one, it's so derivative of like everything else. And again, not having read Jordan's books, I don't know how much influence he had from Tolkien, vice versa, and all that. So I can only compare with what I see. And when I look at this, as like Nemesis said, I keep seeing Tolkien, I keep seeing Game of Thrones, I keep seeing 100 different things I've seen before. And this, by far, makes this particular episode the most boring for me. Because it's also very predictable. I can just, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, beat for beat for beat. I know everything. I might as well be the fortune teller because I see the future. And then on top of that, there's all the plot contrivance that just happens just because the plot needs to move forward. And that's really unfortunate because even with the criticisms we had, there's a lot of this series that I've really enjoyed. But this episode is by far the lowest point in my estimation. There was just nothing fun, nothing new, nothing surprising. And if I can predict everything that's about to happen, why am I even watching it? Just
very, very
no
true.
fun.
Very, very true. What do you think, Steve? Overall episode thoughts?
I'm generally in agreement with most of you. It's just that where I disagree a little bit, it opens up new problems with it. Let me explain what I mean by that. Nem pointed out the point where the certain character that we don't like ends up being the character that takes care of the Balrog, shall we say. But here's the thing. That is not what happens. But they explain it so badly that this is not clear without rewatching this. I didn't even know what was going on the first time that I saw this episode. I had to rewatch some of this stuff slowly, and then I had to rewind things in order to understand what was really going on in the ways. Okay,
put on the subtitles too.
The character that ends up actually saving the day is the right character. It should be this person. The problem is you don't know it's him. And the way that they present the revelations, it's just, you don't understand what really happened, and it's a blink and you miss it moment. That's just terrible, terrible storytelling. I mean, in addition to a lot of the usual problems, which is the same that we've been having, they focus on the things that this show is worst at, which is the relationships. And believe me, the two worst relationships are on display in this episode because we got to sex it up like Game of Thrones. So we have to have these moments. And then what are they doing and not doing? They're not pointing out things that would be a lot more interesting. I would like to see, Rand's self-discovery, drawn out a little bit more so that we see a more logical and more intuitive way of him reaching the conclusion that he comes to. Okay, that would have been nice. I also would like to have seen things going on with Lan that, involving his past, because we find out where he comes from. We see, the people that he knew. Why are we not paying attention to these people? Why is Lan not having meaningful interactions with these people? Because we have to build up this stupid relationship with Lan and Nynaeve, who is the least likable character in this whole show. And that is saying something. Okay. So on top of everything else, and the Rand-Egwene relationship, which we've talked to death, basically, about why that doesn't work. So while we're talking about all these relationships, where are they actually going with the plot? We're not giving near enough. And we're not given enough to even understand what's really happening in the background, because they do a poor job of explaining what does work. So they're taking, and on top of that, we got another case where we have a long prologue, which you do not need in this show to understand what's going on. And unless you've read the book, you're probably not even going to know who this character is until maybe an inkling way late in the episode. So, why are you pointing the camera once again in the wrong place? So basically everything we've complained about that have been the worst parts of this episode are at their absolute worst here. And that's unfortunate.
I will also add just one last thing, and I'll do it briefly because I'm sure we're going to hit it when we get to the scene. Once again, they have put Nynaeve in the center of all of the drama between the five of them. Like, she is the focal point. And I'm like, what has she done in this episode? I don't care what happened in the books. I don't care what you think you want to do. What have you written to make her earn her place as the decider in this group?
Not a damn thing.
No, we are definitely going to get into that. So here's my vision of the writer's room. Hey, y'all, it's a penultimate episode. What do we need? We need the Nookie episode. Because I'm like, that's what y'all decided with the biggest revelation thing we've been waiting on. You decided to put it in the Nookie episode right before the end, So we're going to start from the jump. First of all, when this episode opens, I felt like I was playing an episode of Assassin's Creed. I love the cinematography. It was beautiful. But as I watched the action, I was like, hold up. So y'all telling me that a pregnant woman that is also in labor is fighting off all these? I was like, no, just kick me right out. I was like, no, I don't care how. Now, if you're trying to say, now, stop your spoilers, we have to talk about spoilers. This is what we were witnessing was the birth of Rand. If they were trying to say that him being the dragon reborn endowed him with extra strength in the womb, and that strength flowed through his mother, then I would have wanted to see some of the power-ups, some of the channeling effects, something to indicate that there's something mystical or magical or extraordinary going on or supernatural going on as I'm watching this. Because if you're trying to get me to buy that, a woman that weighs like $1.25 bucks with all her armor on is, pregnant and in labor and she's doing that, no, didn't buy it. And it just irritated me. I think it was supposed to intrigue me and draw me in, but it just irritated me. I'm like, you got to give me a reason to, mark the birth as special. And then she takes a side blow to the uterus. And that knife goes all the way in. And she stops in her tracks. And then it's like, so she dies, but Rand comes out fine. And if you notice, he's extraordinary. He's a big baby when he comes out too. That's the only thing I can give you. Some people are big babies when they're born. But the rest of it, I'm like, no, not buying any of it. And it just felt to me, we've used the words contrived. We used the word illegitimate. It just felt like I don't understand the point of this. If you're trying to sell me on what happens later on in the episode, it's what Steve said. We didn't need that. We didn't need to see that to buy.
I would just add, I know it's a fantasy world. I don't know how you were with your kid, when your kids were born, but my wife, yeah, she could be incredibly strong in place. She wasn't very mobile while she was in labor. That's all I'm going to say.
So yeah, and then speaking of that, if you're talking about like labor room experiences, I mean, there's that extreme amount of back pain. There's what if the epidural doesn't work. Sometimes you have to, if you've gone to Lamaze, you have to learn how to take a tennis ball or whatever you can to massage the lower back. Sometimes the cervix doesn't dilate. There's all kinds of real life things that can happen. And this woman is ninjaing out while she's doing all that. And I'm like, not in this life or the next. So like I said, what would have made me possibly buy this was to see the channeling effects and to see them swirling around her, or maybe a glowing effect on the baby, just slight, not large, but something to indicate there's something supernatural boosting her. Then maybe I would have bought it, maybe. But I was like, you are dead 10 times over. Okay. You were dead 10 minutes ago. Nobody's buying this or whatever. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So once again, the opening moment and what's supposed to be, the most significant birth, the really central birth of the whole season, the whole point that this thing is going, the whole reason that Moraine came to the village happens on screen in front of us. And we're like, what? So you guys tell me what you think about that opening scene with the birth of Rand al Thor. Start with Steve.
Okay, I feel like this scene needs backstory involved with it, because you're not going to know who this woman is if you're just watching the show. All you're going to know is, okay, she's Rand's mom and she knows how to fight with a spear a lot, and that's about it. In fact, her name is Tigraine Mantir. She was a princess of a land called Andor. And at one point, because of a foretelling, she's basically prophesized that she must leave her kingdom and go to the Aiel Waste, or else the world is doomed. So this comes from a very, very reliable foreteller. And she goes out and she does this. And she spends several years among the Aiel, who are basically, imagine, they're kind of like the fantasy, Bedouins, Middle Eastern type people, crossed with Valkyries. Okay, so these are really, really good fighters. Okay, so that's why she can fight really well. But the thing of it is, the way that this whole scene goes, it's not believable, even when you take into the account that these people are ridiculously good fighters. And in fact, to give you an idea of how good they were, it took like 40 to 80,000 of them to basically hold their own with the entire armies of 10 out of 14 kingdoms. That is how good the Aiel are. So her being a really skilled fighter is not the problem. Her being doing these ridiculous things while she is in labor is really, really stupid. And the way that they executed this is really, really stupid. Unfortunately, it's just not believable. It's like there's no way. I mean, you've already described like how this is physically impossible. It should have been executed in a way where you would at least be able to say, okay, she can put up a good fight considering that she's having a baby. But even then, it's like she can't do these superhuman levels of things, without access to the one power. It's just not going to happen. I don't even recall if she can use the one power or not. I don't think so. But even if she could, you'd have to show that, and you'd have to explain that. And at no point is it explained. We don't even know who she is in this prologue, by name or anything else. We don't know where she comes from. But I will say that where Loyal talks about Rand being an Aielman, or confusing him with an Aielman, this is why, because he is Aiel. His father is an Aiel chief, and we see that his mother was basically brought into the tribe. So if you think of basically Boba Fett being adopted by the Tuscans, that's basically what Tigraine was to them. And that's why she knows their fighting skills and whatnot. She is part of their tribe. But even with all of that, I mean, it's just a ridiculous scene. It looks stupid. It wasn't in the books. I mean, we know that she dies at Dragon Mound and all of that, but it was never properly portrayed. So they decided to dramatize it. And of course, in the way that they're dramatizing it, they are over dramatizing it to make her look awesome. Because girl power and whatnot. It's absolutely silly, and it's unfortunate because they could have made her look really tough, without resorting to that and making it to the point where it's almost cartoonish.
All right, here's my question. Compare them to the Amazons. Where are they on that kind of a scale?
I would say they're comparable.
Comparable to the Amazons. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, it sure would have been nice to have some of that context,
Yep.
like you said, spelled out or whatever. Bracy, what do you think about this opening scene?
I don't know whether to consider this to be ridiculous or grotesque. It's somewhere in there. I immediately realized, okay, this is going to be Rand's mother. I can see the shock of red hair. We already know that he's not actually from the Two Rivers. We got like a little taste of that. And we've seen him display superhuman strength. And so, like UDT, I suppose that, all right, if this is going to be the birth of Rand, that somehow this is being channeled into his mother, that is, desperation in utero sort of thing going on. But like you, if that's the case, I want to see some of the effect. But they're trying to save this reveal that's not a reveal if we see this going on. They're trying to do this sleight of hand magic trick, and they're doing it very poorly. I see your red herring, and I up you Captain Obvious. It's not working out, guys.
Red-headed red herring.
Yeah, a red-headed red herring. So the problems I have with this is I didn't think this was going to be in the book, and I'm glad you confirmed that, Steve, because this was ridiculous. I've got no problem seeing a pregnant woman do remarkable things. The adrenaline burst, the primal urge to protect your progeny. All of these things can go. But there are going to be limits, even in a fantasy world. And we can see, as soon as she's introduced, she's already been on the run and fighting. She has several wounds. She's got 2 bloody spears on her back. So she's got to be on her last legs already. Plus, she is given freaking birth. Not only given all the physical problems that's going to cause you, but her center of gravity is way off. So her doing these ninja flips is stupid. I don't know who the choreographer is. It probably wasn't. You're probably just given the thing and told to do whatever with it. Make her awesome. But it's ridiculous. It's patently ridiculous to see her doing these sorts of things, and with this gravid belly, and again, it's also grotesque to see these people trying to actively kill a woman who's about to deliver.
Well, this is the second time we've seen a pregnant woman stabbed in the gut in this show.
Yeah, I mean, wait, with this show, I remember, we certainly saw it in Game of Thrones.
Now, remember that Perrin, that's how he killed his wife. He took that swing, and she was pregnant.
Oh, well, we didn't see this huge gravid belly. But yeah, you're right. But this was even more grotesque because it's so out there. And it again, thinking of Game of Thrones, because we saw a woman get stabbed right in the belly, a very pregnant woman, because again, it's so referential to that sort of thing. I mean, the only thing I can give to the survival of the child is she got stabbed way back here in the back, which that's if it's not in the womb, that's a kidney shot, and she's bleeding out in 5 minutes anyway. So she didn't even have time to deliver the baby. You bleed out fast if you take one to the kidney. It's just so bad. And then to see her without some sort of context of her having superpowers. I mean, she does things that I see in 70s kung fu films that doesn't make sense. She grabs a guy's arm with a couple of spears and she flips a guy by his arm with a couple of spears. You've got no leverage to do that. I'm sorry. If you don't show me she's got some sort of superpowers like the Amazons we all know are superhumanly strong. Yeah, you're not just grabbing the knife out of your side and then getting out from behind this guy and cranking his wrist and arm around to defeat him. No, man. It could have been handled so much better. I think when I think of the scene in A Quiet Place, when I watched the mother in that show giving birth, and there are these awful monsters pursuing her through the house, and I think of the struggle that she performs, that is 1,000 times more heroic and awesome than what I'm seeing here. as this woman is actively dealing with the fact that she is about to deliver and trying her best to save herself and her child. So much, you just handled so much better. But that's the day we like. Every woman's got to be this unbelievable superhero no matter what. And I just don't buy it. I want to refer people to a show. Meanwhile, I started watching on Netflix. A show called Arcane, which is based on the
great show. Great show.
Yeah,
League of Legends.
It's based on League of Legends, the video game, and in it we have female characters, and we see the female characters. They are tough, they are awesome, they are badass, but we watch them struggle, we watch them get hurt, we watch them work for it. What they do is earned. Writers, watch this show and learn from it.
Arcane,
this is how you handle some complex female characters who are tough.
I cannot recommend Arcane enough. It's an incredible show. It's animated. Incredible show.
Incredibly adult and often quite dark for what you'd think as a cartoon. But yeah, check it out.
Interesting social and political themes underneath it, everything too. So,
because we see the lead female character, she gets in a fight and right away, first thing in the fight, she gets punched square in the face. I was like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting her to knock this dude out in one punch.
All right,
and
I do.
But she's
go ahead, Jeff. I want to say one thing, Jeff, before I don't want to go on a tangent, but we talk about this all the time. Arcane, my son and I watched that show a while ago. We were talking about it. Netflix wanted to take control of the production of this show. People at League of Legends said no and retained creative control of it.
Good for them. Good for them.
That's all I'm gonna say. So
yeah, no, that's
and well, you might as well just transition because I pretty much ranted all I'm going to rant about this scene. Oh, and here one last thing that I couldn't help but notice as somebody who did martial arts and did martial arts choreography. There's a couple times, and this happens when you're filming a fight scene, especially when it's very extensive and you've got a lot going on. Your actors and your stunt people get tired as they keep performing these gross motor skills over and over again. Especially if they're going to be really acrobatic. And I noticed in a Last Jedi sort of moment, I noticed there was a moment when like she's in between the final two warriors, and one of them has to pause because he's got a clear open shot at her as she's fighting the two guys off. And there comes a point like, okay, we're just going to use this edit. We don't want to do it again. I was like, he could have run right through right there. So, pay attention to your choreography as well, guys, because some of us out there are definitely going to notice moments like that.
Okay, Nims, thoughts about the opening scene?
There's just two things that I really want to talk about here, because I think you guys hit on a lot of the good stuff about what's actually there. So the first thing I want to say is that we've made the references here numerous times to Game of Thrones, but also to Tolkien, to the Lord of the Rings. Well, when Peter Jackson made the Lord of the Rings, he cut certain characters out. And it hurt a lot of people that were fans of the book, but he did it because you don't have enough backstory to put those characters in context in the story. The one that
like
really
Tom
stands
Bombadil.
out, well, and Glorfindel. It's a perfect example. Yeah. Glorfindel was replaced with Arwen. Now, if you don't know who Glorfindel is, and this dude all of a sudden shows up out of nowhere, and then he shows up at the Siege of Minas Tirith as well, you're like, who the hell is this dude? What is he rolling in? So it's kind of like that with this character here. It's like you have not established any bona fides for the viewer. So to have her all of a sudden is just confusing for everybody out there. That said, I agree with all of you that they put this scene in here to show, female power, to show woman power. All right, but it's so contrived and unrealistic that it's stupid. And yes, it's fantasy, but fantasy still has to have some rules. So I'm going to put my writer's hat on for a second. Bear with me for a moment. I'm not going to take a long time. If you want to make this more realistic, you have this woman fleeing with these people far behind her, and she's obviously in labor and she's struggling, but she's a warrior. And they're catching up with her. Her water breaks. Blood starts flowing down her leg. She grabs the blood. You see a red glow as she grabs the spear on her back, and the blood, it goes into the spear with the glow, and she hurls it with superhuman strength that takes one of them down, impaling them. In the distance, there's a hut that she's trying to get to them. She gets to this hut. You see the other guy catching up to him, and you see them go into the hut together. You hear screams. I mean, you don't have to be super graphic, but you can be a little bit graphic. Screams, fighting, crockery breaking, and then you see an explosion of some sort of power, like a shockwave, and the guy comes running out, screaming, horrified. You don't know why. And the dude that takes the baby stabs the guy, and he goes in there, and there is the woman dead, her womb cut open, and the baby dragon crawling out of the womb by itself.
Oh, wow.
Cut the scene, fade to black.
Oh, that's hardcore.
I was going to say, that's intense right there.
Talk about right there, you're establishing. You don't need to know who this person's name is, but you know that something different happened here, because not all births are like that. You know?
Sometimes it's what you don't see that matters.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So definitely a good angle in terms of how else it could have happened. And it definitely would have had an impact, and it definitely would have creeped us all out. But it would have been a better setup for what's to come later, which was quite underwhelming. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. But we'll talk about it when we get there. Let's talk about what happens next. Now, first off, and I'm going to have Steve give us a little breakdown on what the ways mean from the books. But first off, because we got the background about the actor himself quitting that plays Matt, we have a little bit of understanding, but that's understanding outside of the show. In story, as soon as we pick up from Matt not going in the ways with them, and as the story progresses, it just proves that Matt's presence doesn't matter. Just right away, it's like if you can just lift off and the story still unfolds, and I'm like, then you were an unnecessary character. And I'm like, did y'all realize it? You know, again, you should have thought it through if you're going to write him out. There's a way to write him out. Like, if he has to die, then I would have killed him first in the ways.
You know what? I have to throw this in, and I think those of you who watch Game of Thrones will understand this joke. When I saw that Matt disappeared, I didn't know he was, he left the show. I was like, oh my God, he's Gendry. You know, it's like, he's going to be on that boat for the next 6 years.
So I was like, so the first thing you establish, and I'm like, do you understand that completely undermines everything that you've told us from the beginning, because you've been harping on there are 5 potential candidates for the Dragon Reborn, but you're like, if they don't all go into the ways and if they don't all make it to the eye of the world, it doesn't really matter. And I'm like, well, then you just undercut everything you've been selling us. That's almost as egregious as killing John Connor, spoiler alert, in Terminator Dark Fate, because the entire premise of everything that had to do with the good Terminator, first 2 movies, and Sarah Connor Chronicles, is that John has to live no matter what. And Sarah's willing to sacrifice anything and anybody because John has to live. And then in this movie, it's like, well, maybe not so much. We'll just shift the savior role to the new, girl or whatever. And I'm like, so I kind of felt like that. I'm like, everything you've been selling us from the jump is not true. If Matt can just not go into the ways, and Moraine is like, well, if it's really him, I can't get him close to the dragon anyway, or the dark one anyway. I was like, what did you say? And then it's like, I promise you we'll find him and all that. So that was my first thing. I was like, whatever. But then next, and I'm going to bring Steve in here, putting on my writer's hat, I'm like, if there's anything you got to do, you have to help us understand the rules of the ways. What little tidbits we did get were about how it's basically like a transport system. It's a distance cheat. So somehow being in the ways shortens the physical distance out in the real world. That much we got. But there's so many other things going on, and the Ogier just begins to elaborate. I felt like I was watching Labyrinth, the Bog of Eternal Stench. I felt like there's all kinds of creepy crawlies and stuff in here, but I'm not clear as to what they are and what the legit threats are and all that. And then she says, watch out for my chinny chin chin, because my chinny chin chin finna talk to you and don't believe nothing they say. And I'm like, okay, so then there's a manifestation of a negative evil presence that's going to harp on your worst fear or whatever. And she didn't mention that for y'all went into ways. It's just like, oh, by the way, there's going to be some nightmare fuel just buzzing around in your head, but don't worry about that. And so anyway, so Steve, why don't you jump in here and give us the rules of the ways from the books?
Yeah, my memory of this is a little hazy, but my understanding is that it's a completely dark area, that there are chasms that open up all over the place, randomly and all of that. So they kind of did a little bit of a cheat when it comes to this. So they use these hexagonal bridge type things to make that work because they needed to make it work visually, that kind of thing. At one point, it didn't look like that. At one point, it was meant to be almost like a paradise, the way that the Ogier, who originally built it, worked like that. It is a transport system. The idea being that a certain amount of distance through the ways represents a longer distance in the real world. Okay, that's fine. Now, I do think that the show kind of doesn't get the math right because they seem to be acting like it took a day to get to Faldara, and that would have been like the same amount of time walking. No, that you guys needed to do a little bit more research on that. Admittedly, I don't know 100% if that's right, but I don't think it is. And so you have this whole area, and apparently it's been corrupted by the Dark One. Which is why Loyal talks about, oh yes, back in our day it was this green verdant thing, and now everything is pitch black, and we fear to go into this and so forth. I don't remember exactly why that's the case. I think it is corruption of some kind from the Dark One, but don't quote me on that. Machin Shin, I do remember the Black Wind, but this is another case where honestly the rules of this needed to be made clearer, because it had been a while since I've read this, and I don't remember exactly how that was supposed to work in the books. I don't know if it's a thing where, okay, it's playing on your fears. I don't know if they're telling truths in your head. I don't know whether it's one of those things that's like a Dementor from Harry Potter, which, it just kind of sucks, the life out of you and, convinces you of like the things that you're convincing yourself of that basically destroy your self-esteem. I don't know exactly how that works. And the show does not do a good job of explaining that. And so we really don't know what the Black Wind is saying to them, or how much we should believe what the Black Wind says. Because sometimes it turns out to be very accurate. And then other times it's like, no, I don't really believe that. This is probably lying with perfect truth. But I will say I agree with you on Moraine. She absolutely did not tell the truth to any of the people coming into the ways. And, once again, Aes Sedai lying with total truth, lying by omission, getting them to go along with it. And you have to wonder, did Matt not go along because he suspected that she was lying? It could be. Or did he not go because of some other reason? In story, we don't know because, that was not supposed to happen. He was written out because, they got rid of the actor for one reason or another, or the actor left. We still don't know what the answer is on that. And so you're kind of left with a situation where, how much of this is Jordan versus how much of this is the showrunners completely messing things up. I think that there's a certain amount of debate you can have on that.
See, that was the thing. So we know that it's a pathway for, because later on they discover a Trolloc. So we know it's a conduit for the Trollocs, which explains how the Trollocs have been able to get from point A to point B faster. But that's not supposed to happen. But what that means is story-wise that there should be a consequence. And, it just happens. And like that shouldn't happen, but then something's supposed to happen. And then, like I said before, I said last episode, I would have liked to have seen some type of air or oxygen vacuum or some type of ticking clock where they won't be able to breathe that air because it's warped in time. So your molecules slowly start to fray apart when you're in the waves, and only stronger people can stay in there longer. And you can't really breathe because you're starting to de-res. I would have bought that, but just, as is. And then, so the Dark One is commandeering it as a path now. And then the peddler, what was his name? Peyton Fane. The peddler is going through there too. So it's like, what are the rules? What are the rules here? And then on top of all that, like Steve already alluded to, when we have the Balrog moment, And when we're in trouble and somebody's going to have to do something, it looks like it's Nynaeve, and we're led to believe it's Nynaeve. And then later on, we see that no, it's actually our Dragon Reborn doing his mail channeling thing. And I'm like, and this is one of the few times where both Moraine and Land, their indifferent, calm, cool, collected attitudes really made me upset. I'm like, y'all need to be reacting to this. Okay, you need to feel like there's a scene in Empire where Luke is about to leave, and Ben's Ghost and Yoda are saying, "You're not ready to face Vader." And Luke is like, "But Han and Leia are going to die if I don't go." And Yoda's like, "If you believe in what they stand for, you let them die because you're not ready." And then they wait for a moment. It's a pregnant pause, and Luke is like, "R2 fires the converters." Yoda's like, "Oh Lord." Luke leaves, and then he utters the line that Ben goes, "That boy's our last hope." And Yoda says, "No, there's another." That was this moment to me. Y'all, as the mentors, should have been reacting to Matt just going off, to the Dragon Reborn not being revealed yet to the rest of y'all, to the fact that my chin Black Wind is in there messing with people's heads, to the fact that you have one of the most powerful channelers in Nynaeve by your own confession that you've ever seen, and y'all are just kind of blasé about all that. No. And the last thing I'll say, then I'll throw it to Nims, is there's y'all will know the name of the episode. Steve will know what I'm talking about. Y'all will know when I say it. There's an episode of Kolchak, or Kolchak, however you say that, where there's this creature that the way it kills you is that it morphs into somebody that you trust. And then you get close to it, and then you see its true face, and it kills you. Y'all know what I'm talking about? And so
yeah, it was kind of reminiscent of the salt vampire in Star Trek as well.
And so Kolchak was talking to one of the Yoda guru wisdom mage characters in the episode and trying to get more intel on this thing. And the mage goes, "This thing will find somebody you trust." And Kolchak's like, "I don't trust anybody." He's like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter." And so the creature ends up morphing into like this little old sweet lady. And so Kolchak is like, Mrs. Dozenbladder or whatever. And he gets up on it. And so that's what this felt like to me. That's the way you do somebody that's screwing with your head, making your fears come to life, making you doubt yourself, making you wonder what it is that I can trust. That's the way you do something like that. But here it's like Steve said, it's like some of that my chin Black Wind is saying is true. And then some of it is kind of true. And then some of it is your fear. And I was like, this was such a rich environment that could have just filled in so many blanks and been such a great scenario, and y'all just no. So Nims, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. Now I haven't read as much as Steve has, but when I saw this, it really piqued my interest. And it piqued my interest because, like all writing, when something really cool comes up, people steal it. Well, in the Dragon Age games, they stole this. The Illuvians in the Dragon Age games are this, to evolve. Well, and so I did a bunch of research on what this was, what Howard was going for, and he stole this from Tolkien. I mean, and because it's the Palantirs, but to a different level. And so looking at this, I started researching, what he was going with the Ogiers and everything. Well, much like the Illuvians, which came to the Dragon Age games, this is supposed to be a realm of magic that is dictated by thought, by will. They created this paradise, these Ogiers, here. And the Dark One here, so how, this is where his stuff deviates, but kind of holds true to Sauron, is that he's a deceiver. He's a corrupter. He doesn't conquer by force all the time. And so that, what was the name of that monster in there? I forget, the Balrog character.
The Machinche.
Yeah, it is a corrupting influence that destroyed this kingdom for the Ogiers and is still there. And it made it so that the Trollocs could access it. But the biggest thing is that it is trying to get you to destroy yourself. That's how the Ogiers lost this kingdom. And so that's why I did like this scene, and here's why. even though it frustrated the hell out of me that they put Nynaeve in here, I had thought about it afterwards. It still frustrates me that they made Nynaeve the central part and didn't explain who actually destroyed or beat back this force. But here's the thing.
And I will say that whole thing was not convincing. Are you seriously telling me she didn't know that she wasn't channeling? I mean, how does she not know that? No, that's nonsense.
But here's the thing. Here's how I see it. And I don't know if they did this on purpose, but here's how I see it. This thing plays on your weaknesses, your arrogance, your vanity, all of the worst aspects of you. Who is the most person who is convinced that she is the most powerful, the most right, the most righteous, the person that will save everyone, and that everyone must depend on them in this whole group?
Nynaeve.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does this thing show her? What does it reinforce? What bad traits is it reinforcing in her? That's how I saw it.
Well, before I throw it to Bracy, I also want to point out that, this was also another relationship Black Wind moment, because it's like, Perrin, you actually love Egwene, and Egwene, you're a fraud, you're not real, and Moraine, you're going to kill them all and call it heroism. You're going to justify retroactively your morally heinous actions like you always do, and it's going to cost some more people their lives and all this different kind of stuff. And I'm like, once again, I just want to know the rules.
Yeah. I will say that they didn't do a good job spelling that out for you so you know exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. But if you sit and you start to think about it in a larger context of other fantasy, and you shouldn't have to do this, don't get me wrong, but you think about it in that, you think about it in philosophy and stuff, and you start to think about it's like Lucifer, one of them, if you want to get really into it, and let's talk about it as a concept, not as spiritual. The greatest thing, the most dangerous thing he can do is mix a lie with a bunch of truths, to get you to go in a certain direction. And that's how I see this. That's how I see the evil one. And we'll see that in the next episode as well. It's like he'll tell you a bunch of lies, but he'll put a truth in there so that his lies start to seem more plausible.
It goes back to us doing the work of the show, and we shouldn't have to do that.
No, we shouldn't.
Absolutely shouldn't. Another really good cult sandwich is a whole bunch of truth to justify morally heinous actions. And that's pretty much Moraine to me, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But so like I said, it was such a prime opportunity to really get into people's heads and to go deeper and to manifest visions and to, just all kind of places it could have gone because of that kind of environment.
And once again, I don't know how much time you would have needed in show for this, but I am sure that there is some time they could have found to show the temptation or the attempted corruption of each of these characters in more detail to give us background.
Because maybe if they cut all the sexy time and the unnecessary prologue, you would have gotten that.
Because this was a seminal moment in a ally of the evil one, a creature of the evil one, truly testing them, and revealing to them who they are or who they think they are, which is even more important. So.
That's right. And a more effective way, and then I'm going to throw it to Bracy, a more effective way is to have that come out of the mouths of the people closest to you. So the Black Wind attacking them and them hearing voices is one thing. What would have happened if all of those words and revelations and whatever started coming out of the mouths of your traveling companions? And all of a sudden, Moraine turns to Egwene and said, you're just a fraud, right?
That would have been so much better.
Right. That little channeling ability you've got. I've just been buttering you up because, I didn't really have the courage to tell you that, you'll never be an Aes Sedai.
And once again,
what I'm saying?
Or Lan talking to Moraine about how she justifies, all her bad stuff as heroism, which he actually would be thinking.
Yeah.
Or Loyal says, you humans are funny to me. There's no way you're going to survive in here. And I knew that. I'm strong enough to survive, but you guys aren't. But, I'm kind of always impressed by your willingness to go on suicide missions. I think that's fascinating. Anything like that. We've seen that done in other shows where the other characters are the ones where those fears it's coming out of their mouths.
Yeah.
And it almost kind of stops you in your tracks and you get shook.
And as a person who writes some horror and some fantasy and science fiction and anything, you know, the darkness inside, the darkness that plays with your mind and your emotions can be more evil than anything, you know, any Jason Voorhees on the screen, you know, so.
Which is yet another reason it was also lame not to have Matt here, because he's already struggling with darkness and madness.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, go ahead, Bracy. What do you think about this little trip through the waves and the black wind and the Trollocs and all the above?
All right, let's start with Matt. Matt not going in is significant. Just looking at the context of the show. And once again, this decision to, you know, and there's a character moment there, like, did he decide not to come or did you decide for him? Because you get the feeling that they could have kept the door open. And when they see Matt wavering, you know, Moraine's like, yeah, go ahead, let the door close. He's a bad guy anyway. Don't trust him. Don't like him, all this stuff. And even Lan chastises her like, what? Well, what if he's the one? And she said, well, if he's the one, I know what decision he'll make. Well, you know what? That doesn't matter. How can you be so sure any of the others are not going to be tempted? You're just 100% positive he is. And we see later on that she's prepared in her own way to deal with that. So if you don't take Matt and you end up sacrificing yourself and all these kids and your warder facing the evil one, and none of you can do anything to stop him, then Matt's still out there if he's the dragon. So all you've done is slow things down. You haven't stopped anything. You have failed utterly by not taking Matt. So that level of arrogance is just contemptible, if you ask me. And the show has made it that you know, the show has basically engendered a level of contempt for Matt that's not valid. I was glad to see Rand stand up for him a little bit later on, because he's right. Like, Matt has it hard, and he's been looked down on, and he's not perfect. He's by far is not perfect, but he should not be given up on. And that, to Rand's credit, is something he never does. He never gives up on Matt. So we see that, and even Nynaeve's like, hey, you know, we need to go get him. Like, so there was like actually a moment I could get behind there. It's like, yeah, don't leave anybody behind. You work so hard to get everybody together. But Moraine is so confident that she took Nynaeve and Egwene before the Amlin seat. It's one of these two, for sure. One of these two. Don't worry about any of the others. I'm 100% right. I'm wearing the blue. We're in the know. That's what the blue do, right? That's what we do. They're blue, we do.
Mm-hmm.
But she's wrong. She is disastrously wrong. And this only gets fixed because we have a last-minute huge info dump. We've seen everybody else's power grow to a degree over time. Either fantastically an explosive moment. We've seen Egwene practice. We've seen Perrin begin to get this commingling with the wolves. And we've seen one little hint of what Matt can do. What Rand can do. And this is something that we should have seen him building up along with everybody else. We should have seen these hints, these things that continue to go. But we only got that one thing because, again, it's such an obvious freaking thing. All these other characters are red herrings. The fact that we don't see Matt doing anything, it just screamed like he's the dragon. He's the guy. Because we're looking so hard at everybody but Matt. It's a shell game where the shell is marked. It's like the ball under this cup. Follow this. You can see the little bullseye, right? Look at how clever I am. It's like no. It's once again, like I said earlier, it's like I can see it all coming. It's ridiculous. To your point, Steve, I do think I do think Nynaeve was channeling when she, has her moment for her next Kamehameha. But I don't think, obviously she wasn't doing it all. She was probably giving all she could at the time. But there's just no way she was doing it all, as we find out later. But we should have had indications and inklings that this was going on. I did think it was kind of clever that when they encountered the Trolloc, Egwene thought it was her, because like she sees the power, and she's used it the least as far as the people that we've seen actually channel. It feels like she should have known that she didn't actually channel, or maybe she started to channel. But again, it's all of this is compacted in here, and because we focus on so many other things that are unnecessary in the show, time to develop this idea just doesn't happen. When we get into the whole
on all parts, yeah,
just like when we get into the Black Wind, it would have been nice to have a moment like, if we get a little bit more history, like the Black Wind will speak to you, it will lie, instead of like, at least we even got like just a little nod, one little dialogue in Lord of the Rings when we see the black birds flying around, and Gandalf's like, "Hi, they're spies for Sauron." Something. Okay, they're on his side. It'd be nice to know. It'd be a little bit more world building. It's like, oh, the Black Wind is part of this corrupting force. It did this on purpose to the realm that the Ogier built. That would have been nice to have. And I love your idea, DT, about how the corruption handles, where like it you see it kind of like get into them, influence them. They start yelling at each other, because that's more interesting, is the breaking apart of the unit, the breaking of the fellowship, if you will, than them just being bombarded by whispery words. Because if that's all these things are doing, okay, it's very distressing. I'm sure it's mentally anguishing, but what's to stop us from just hunkering down and keeping on moving forward? In my mind, I kept thinking they were going to have these self-suicidal thoughts where they would start all kind of walking away from each other towards the crevice, towards that abyssal fall into forever. And then somebody would have to snap out of it and start like and try and wrangle them all in. And I thought, because other than that, I guess the danger here is it's going to drive you mad, but we haven't been told that's the case. We have to infer again, and self-doubt can be crippling in a way, but I don't know. I just didn't really get the threat here. It just didn't feel threatening enough. It didn't feel life-threatening. It didn't feel like something that would really and truly stop it. So it just the psychic assault. It just didn't seem like enough for me. I would have liked to have something more, have some deeper explanation as to why this thing was so dangerous and what it could do to you. And like Steve, I had to go back and watch this segment a few times. I even put the subtitles on so I could hear exactly what the Black One was saying over the din of all the noise and everything. And it just was like it was just kind of meh when you get right down to it.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I thought the appearance of the Trolloc was far more scary, especially because where there's one Trolloc, there's got to be a lot more sneaking around somewhere. And on top of that, going back 2 episodes back, remember when we saw Rand and Matt check into the hotel at the city around the White Tower? We heard the little whistle and the figure staying outside, and then before we see the Trolloc, we hear that little whistled tune again. See, now that was cool to me. And then later on, we find out it's Fane, and he's walking through the ways. And I had to see him in the city again later on, because at first I thought it was Matt following him through the ways. Like, how did Matt get through the ways? Because you just see him from the back, and they got the curly hair, and they do some like quick little shots, because you don't expect this guy to be coming along. So that was so much more interesting. And it's like you like to say so many times, DT, the camera's not in the right place. The camera should have been over here instead of over here. So those ideas just were poorly developed, poorly executed. I will give them points for the staging of this. They used the darkness well. The cinematography is good. You've got a TV budget, and they're making the most out of the TV budget. I like the torchlight. It does a great job of showing the actors where you need to and obscuring everything else against the darkness. And the big black open space just gives you that idea of infinity, that you can fall away into nothing. And the columns are a nice way to kind of border and frame everybody in, so you can see where they need to go and where they are going. So I give them big points on that part, at least.
Well, the point
if
you
I
just
could,
brought up. Oh, go ahead, Nims.
I was gonna say if I could push back just a bit on that, it's like I agree with you that I think the concept or the execution was bad, but I really like the concept. I guess maybe I'm a little biased because I think that the dark one, the evil one here, is playing the long game. Copyright D.W. Howard out later this year. But I have this in my book as well. But the problem is when I do it in my book, it's a number of dream sequences over a long time where it's putting poison into your heart. So this time,
but we don't see that. We've had this whole series up to now. We see
management once again.
Yeah, we see all these dreams, and all these dreams could have been building up on this idea of internal corruption. But instead, we don't see an internal corruption. We just see sort of a boogeyman. We don't get the idea of Rand's being corrupt in the dreams, and we just hear the other people talking about their dreams, but not enough that lets us know that they are being affected in that sort of way. So that's why this scene doesn't play for me.
And that's why
they had opportunities to do it.
I agree with you. The execution is bad, and it's like if you're going to do this, it needed to be either introduced here and be something that carries on in later episodes, but it's introduced in the next to last episode. You don't have any.
Yeah, it's too late. It's too late.
Yeah.
Well, again, I know he's not our favorite nowadays, and I'm not talking about that, but Whedon is a master at stuff like this. Several times he had Hawkeye and Black Widow have to talk each other out of their PTSD about all the stuff that they've done. And then he had Loki fail spectacularly because he didn't understand that part of Natasha's powers and training is to completely make you give her what she wants. And she's acting, but you can't see it. And, it's part of her seductiveness. And so we've seen this kind of thing done better. And also, if there is, we are on a narrow way, and it says you can fall to an eternal death. That wasn't scary enough. That should have been more scary. And then the point you just made, Bracy, about how for every Trolloc that you see, there's 50 that you don't. They like roaches. So,
I think if you want to see the best example of this type of insidious corruption,
insidious is a good word.
In fantasy, look to Tolkien. You look at what Sauron did with the One Ring, and you also look at what Grima Wormtongue did to Theoden.
The corruption of Saruman as well.
Yeah.
And that points out another unfortunate weakness to this writing, and that is that even when the characters have moral struggles, we don't feel them. Like we can describe them, but we don't feel them. We don't really see them struggling with almost anything that they do. It's like they're going through the motions. But again, the gut punch isn't there, which leads me conveniently to our next locale. So we get to Fal Dara, and then they have a bit of a contest as to, who's the dominant figure. And, and Moraine said that, they were friendly to Aes Sedai, but they didn't necessarily feel friendly when she got there. They felt like they was fronting each other off a little bit. But, now that we got that straight, okay. And then there's a straight up failed Aes Sedai, like, you almost were the Scarlet Witch, but you ain't ever going to roll like that. So, and Moraine kind of throws that in her face, which I thought was a bit of a low blow. That's like saying, we know that you didn't really make the Olympics like the rest of us, but we're going to still be nice to you anyway. And I was like, that was a little bit ugly. And then this also introduced my favorite character in the episode. Do you know my favorite character in the episode? Here it comes. The Blight. I love the Blight. The Blight looks like if halitosis was a plant. If the earth had bad breath in it, that's what the Blight looked like. I'm like, you need some Listerine all up in that mug. But anyway, I love the Blight. I love the idea of it. I love the way it looks. I love that it's creeping, living, evil and all that. And I love that you have to cut through it. It's my favorite thing in this episode. I'm like, man, I dig that. That's a great idea. But, it's the only one. So now we're in this city that feels like a city that time forgot. It also feels like a city with samurai and Valkyries and gypsies and God knows what else. So I'm like, okay. So once again, you have all these different cultural elements in it, but okay. And then for him to say that they've been defending, that this is a point of defense, and they've been defending against the forces of evil for 1,000 years. All I have to say is, where do you see what happens in next episode? So I'm saying it now because I'm gonna bring it up again. Then, like, really, y'all had 1,000-year stand. Y'all was batting 1,000 for 1,000 years. Remind me of the old Republic and the Jedi, and how just all of a sudden here comes Sheev Palpatine. But anyway, so they're in this thing, and coolest character is the Blight, and a whole bunch of stuff happens here. That's the most head scratching, irritating, annoying. Why would you spend the penultimate episode doing this kind of stuff? And I'm just like, so we're going to just hit each one of these, and then I'm going to hear what my co-hosts have to say, because I know they got plenty to say. First off, we need to point out once again that Rand and Egwene do not have any chemistry. It just is not there. And so, like you guys explained, sometimes actors are cast just from a reading, or a reading with one person, or a reading for the casting director. And by the time they get with the rest of the cast, they're already in the role. But there is just nothing. I mean, over time, I have accepted Anakin and Padme, but that's only because Anakin is a serious creep. He's just like he's a serious creep that's been fantasizing about this girl literally since he was a little boy. So I'm like, you're that stalker, and we know you're super possessive. So we know dudes like that. So I was like, I didn't want Luke's father to be that guy, but he's that guy. So okay. But here, it's just nothing. It's just nothing. And then she's not mad because of what I'm fixing to talk about. She's mad that, you don't believe that I believed in Matt, and he's defending the honor of his friend who abandoned them. And I'm like, y'all know that none of what y'all saying make any sense, right? Or any difference, because Matt ain't there. So that's number two. But the next thing was, and we talked about it in the opening. First of all, we have noticed that there's chemistry between the actors through Perrin and Egwene, but we could swallow it as brother sister. We could swallow it as longtime friend. We could see it in those different contexts. But here, it morphs into this Dawson's Creek triangle that we've never talked about before. Now, and now all of a sudden we have to and Perrin and Rand, man, they're toe to toe. As men, we know what that means. Because when you this close to my face, we finna throw hands. I don't need to smell your breath. And Perrin is like, I've never loved anyone but my wife. Okay, after that, I thought the line should have been, who are you trying to convince? Me or yourself? That would have been the line. But now all of a sudden we're supposed to buy that he's been carrying this torch, and then we get Nynaeve. Lord have mercy. Not only are you in the middle of the Dawson's Creek Triangle, but you have the most nonsensical line of the episode, which says, I'm tired of you all fighting over her like she's something to be won. When did they fight over her before?
Yeah,
how long have they fight over her? What's the context for that line?
Yeah.
They're just going off, just Fred Sanford. This is the big one. Yeah, really? When did they do that? Before now.
And she's also a hypocrite because she clearly treats land as something to be won.
Oh, I'm gonna get there. Oh, we gonna get there. And then
that's your feminist PSA too. So
and then it's like right. That whole feminism thing, like, she's not a prize to be won. She's not. And then Egwene does that. Stop fighting over me, look, or whatever. And Rand basically throws it out there. He says that the day you proposed to your wife was the day that me and Egwene got together, implying very directly that you only went for Layla because you found out Egwene wasn't available. And I'm saying to myself one more time, context, when it's coming out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're expecting us to buy this, and then we got the feminist PSA, and not even, I'm like, you talking about something that we have never seen happen on screen. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Not only that, if some dude said that to me and I really did love my dead wife, he'd be on the ground at that point.
Yeah.
Once again, we men, you don't come up on me like this and I'm accusing you and you accusing me and you're breathing all heavy and all that in. No, I'm at least going to push you off me. So, and then on top of all that, we get, I don't know if I can call it a character 180 because we talked about it before, but we get something every representation of Nynaeve up to this point has been angry black woman. You don't know me. You don't tell me what to do. I don't bow down to any authority. The Aes Sedai need to be afraid of me because I'm all that. And then all of a sudden, she's this docile, googly-eyed, old land. And I'm like, you've known this man for 3 days. And here you come doing a complete 180. Now all of a sudden, you're not angry black feminist woman. Now you're all, what, are you lonely? I don't know what you are. Okay, and then finally, we get a backstory with Land that should have hit. It should have hit, and it was just like another, big round of, like a big round of nothing soup. Here's your nothing soup. Oh, yeah, that tastes like nothing. Because I'm like, you just kind of casually throw out this backstory that he's a king. He's a Ronin, but he's a king. But his family was slaughtered, all this different kind of stuff. And I'm like, and if that had happened apart from Nynaeve, maybe we would have cared more. But also, I must say, like Logan / Wolverine, if I never saw the full backstory, that would have been fine. If they would have made some level of mystery around Wolverine, I would have been okay with that due to the nature of the character. And Lan is the same way to me. I didn't really need to, it didn't enrich the experience of the character for me. Because I was like, to me, that makes you look all the more weak. You got all that. You remind me of Athos from the Three Musketeers TV show, who was a landowner and was a rich man, and he threw it all away because he just didn't want a deal. I'm like, really? So instead of dealing with your inheritance or whatever, and then Nynaeve says something dumb like, now, I never understood why you bonded yourself to Moraine. And Lana's like, you do now? I'm like, so we barely know each other. And I'm angry black woman. Oh, time for some nookie. And now I get you. Now we all here now. I understand why you're with Moraine. And so I get once again that they're trying to get us to accept polyamory, or that's part of the vibe, is everybody's polyamorous. Okay. But I'm saying with none of these relationships that I've just described did I feel any type of emotional gut punch.
Sorry.
No, that was good. That was good.
That was low, man. That was low.
I was thinking either that or Bad Romance, because we got two of them competing.
Well, don't get me started on Dawson's Creek. The only thing that upsets me with Dawson's Creek is Smallville. Because Smallville is a child of Dawson's Creek, but don't get me started. So the point I'm trying to make is that this was the Nookie episode because Rand and Egwene hooked up, and in the same sentence, they're talking about the way Lan bonded with Moraine. He just got through this hookup with Nynaeve. So I'm like, that whole section just frustrated me. Like I said, I like the Blight. I didn't like Moraine dissing off little Junior Scarlet Witch. You're not really one of us. I didn't like nothing that happened. And it just, I don't know, it just frustrated me. I was like, the last thing this show needed was a triangle. And the last person who needs to be in that triangle is Nynaeve. And she's a liar, just like Lalandrin, because she's hooking up with a dude on the side as well. I'm like, oh, y'all lying. But anyway, so I know that's a mouthful. I know I talked about a lot, but all that happened when we get to this city. And like I said, I like the Blight and then nothing else. So let me hear your thoughts on all the relationships I just talked about. Start with Bracy.
That's 3 triangles.
3 triangles?
3 triangles. Well, let's see. You got Lan, Nynaeve, then you got Moraine, and then you got Moraine's other little triangle with the Amlin seat.
Oh, that's right.
And then you potentially got Perrin and Egwene with Rand, and it's like triangles overlapping triangles. It gets really weird really fast in this show. So that's the way I see it. Multiple triangles. Triangles within triangles within triangles.
Okay.
Or it's an equilateral triangle with triangles inside the triangles. There we go.
Before you say what you're going to say, can I just say right now, I don't know about you guys, but I want to say how much I hate that whole genre of shows, 90120, 90210, Melrose Place, Dawson's Creek. Never watched one episode, and now I'm triggered. I am personally triggered that DT brought up Dawson's Creek. That's why I had to put that out there, because now I'm hurting inside right now. So I'm just putting that out there. I may have to leave the show, but
Steve knows I'm trying not to get triggered. Inside there's my trigger button, and I'm like, nope, don't do it. Because if we
this is getting
CW
CW levels of ridiculous with these relationships.
I would rather take lashes with a cat of nine tails than watch those shows. So.
If we get started on Dawson's Creek and Smallville, we're gonna be here 3 hours.
Okay.
Y'all not gonna ever shut me up.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I had to get that out there. I mean, I was over here like I'm like killing things with my feet down here. So.
That's a funny thought. The Blight's cool. Me and my wife are watching this. I'm looking at the Blight, and I'm thinking, like, this is kind of like the anti-Sleeping Beauty, except instead of protecting Sleeping Beauty, like the Blight is surrounding the Sleeping Darkwind, which I thought was kind of a cool flip of that sort of idea, as he's trying to wake up, and the Blight's kind of expanding, whereas like the great grove of thorns protected Sleeping Beauty from anybody getting to her and her kingdom and rescuing them. So that's what it came to me visually, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I kind of did want to know, like everything else in the show, I wanted to know a little bit more about the Blight. The way Lan ends up describing his past with the Blight, it made it sound very aggressive, where it's this static thing, and you hear this kingdom has been fighting the Blight for 1,000 years. I'm like, well, what happened to Lan's kingdom? You know, he's the prince of a kingdom. Oh, crap. I'm about to lose battery. No. Let's turn this way down. Lan's family had been fighting. Like, I want to know how they lost. That would be interesting to see. And if the Blight is this slowly growing, creeping thing, how did it so rapidly overtake their kingdom that it ended up slaughtering his entire family? There's a story in there. And once again, as we said, this is something that this would have made a much more interesting flashback, as opposed to some exposition that was far less impactful. One of the first things I noticed upon coming to the city is, like you guys, I liked a lot of the cultural influences, the very clear cross between the Japanese and Chinese medieval cultures. You see it in the wearing the armor and the headdress and stuff, and that's something this show just kind of kills at. I love the production value. I love the set designs. I love the costuming. It's always a pleasure to see what they're going to do and what aspects of our world that we're going to pull from for this sort of thing. One thing that I could not help but be struck by was Moraine when it comes to this. Moraine is particularly vile when she gets to the city.
Good word.
And not only has she lied to them to get them into the ways and not given them information they needed, she gets to the city and she sends the Red Aja after Matt, because that's her backup plan. I'm going to cut Matt loose, but I'm also going to cut Matt off at the knees. So there's that. When she, like you said, we talked to the failed Aes Sedai, the princess, and she talks down to her. She's just really rude, and it's conceited the way she treats her. It's like, again, it's nothing that makes us like the Aes Sedai at all. And then later on in the scene, when they encounter the woman who can see the future, the prophetess, she threatens her to get her to do what she wants her to do. Like, I need you to look at these people. I need you to read them for me. And it's like, do they know what I am? No, because we haven't told anybody. It would be such a shame if people were to find out, you'd be hounded all the time or worse. Like, it's an awfully nice business you got here. It'd be a shame if anything was to happen to it. You know what I'm saying? Let's have a little bit of that protection money, shall we? All right, capiche. We're good, right? So, like, oh, great. So the Aes Sedai, or Moraine in particular, are just mobsters, bullies, thugs. We've seen that they rule only through power, and this was her least flattering episode. There are times when I really like Moraine, and I understand her motivations, but like in this particular episode, another reason I didn't like it, she is just balls to the wall, just full of suckage right now. It's like nothing likable about her at all here. The episode, of course, once again breaks its rules because we went all this way talking about the bonding of the Aes Sedai to the Warders. But yeah, that's all. It is land, doesn't matter. Land, Moraine, they're special, I guess. We break all the rules because we have to force this relationship to happen that nobody wants to see, nobody believes. I don't care if they've been traveling together for a month. It's like you said, her characterization the whole time is angry black woman, and then all of a sudden she's going to turn around and for one evening be soft and coy and demure. Not buying it for an instant. Not for an instant. Yeah, like she's just always angry and rude to everybody, and so even when she's right to not trust Moraine, it's always coming across as once again somebody who lacks a significant amount of wisdom because she's got no social skills whatsoever. Rand and Egwene, of course. I'm having to wonder now if this is planned, if the non-chemistry is planned, if they're putting together something with Egwene and Perrin, because there is a hint, a tiny, tiny hint. If you'll remember all the way back to the first episode, when they're celebrating, Egwene's got her braid, and there's this big celebration in the tavern, and Nynaeve comes up to Perrin and is like, he and Rand are like looking at Egwene, and she comes up like she's seeing something she don't like. She says, "Hey, man, your wife's at home and forging's hard." It's like, well, she doesn't have to be forging. It's after hours. It's her choice if she wants to sit back and forge. Like, all right, I'll go home and help my wife. So if that's there, if that's something they wanted to do, again, it's another thing that they just put in like a tiny little hint, but they didn't do anything with it. Sort of like the idea of the corruption nymph. So I don't know. It doesn't feel justified once again. And then the way they went about it, and I'm guessing it is there because you'll notice when Nynaeve throws that out and all these accusations are flying, Perrin is the one who says like, "I never loved anyone but my wife." Egwene doesn't defend herself until later when she's alone and she can kind of like browbeat Rand into apologizing. I waited a whole hour in my room for you to come and apologize. It's like, apologize for what? I admit what I said. But like
the most realistic part of that whole episode, or that whole
yes,
right there.
Well,
that's totally it.
He's been a major chimpanzee since we met him for this girl.
Yeah,
and he keeps sipping hard because like, I'm sorry, I was just scared. So okay, so like you're scared, right? You're like, she's angry, she's cool, she's angry, it's okay, but you're scared, you're totally emasculated.
Right. You're dragon reborn, but you're scared of your girlfriend. Why? Why are you scared of your girlfriend? And another thing I forgot to mention, I told y'all not to get me started, is that Land completely contradicted. He said, okay, this is just like the Apollo thing to me. In Rocky 3, Apollo said, it doesn't take a man to stand there and get his head beat in. In Rocky 4, he stood there and got his head beat in. So in this episode, what Land said to Nynaeve to Moraine was, I didn't have anything to live for or die for until you gave me both, which is codependency, number one. But number two, I'm like, you're a prince.
And even if this,
we're talking about you had nothing to fight for.
And even if this isn't his city, even if his kingdom has fallen to the Blight, he is part of this new kingdom here. And there is a duty and a tradition of honor. And this is an honorable man. He could have stood on the line against the Blight his whole life and been fine. He has all the respect of these people in this city. You see that when he first comes in.
Yes.
So again, the characterization just continues to fail, and it's just one more reason upon reason after reason. This is the worst episode I've watched up until this point.
It definitely feels like they threw a bunch of ideas against the whiteboard and said, okay, we're going to do all that.
It's like, well, we got 2 episodes. Let's squeeze it all together.
All right, Dims, I know you're bursting at the seams because we went into the DC zone, so I'm going to let you jump in. Before I throw it to Steve.
Let's start with the good. So let's start with the city. You know, I'm so upset. I can't even remember the fa la 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 city. You know,
Father.
yeah. You know, they show up. Like I said, the whole setting very much reminded me of Conan. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And then we get there, and we come to find out that the setting may be Conan, but this is Minas Tirith. This is Minas Tirith.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, and right away, before I get into any of the other Dawson's Creek crap, you know, because I can't use any other word. It's crap. Before I get into any of that, we spent all this time dealing with that and a bunch of other nonsense in the next episode when you have the most interesting thing we've seen so far right here, which is how are these people fighting the Blight? How are they keeping this force of nature out? How are they dying? How did the other city die? What's happening to your warriors? Is there something mystical associated with it? Are there physical attacks? Oh, by the way, you've got a giant wall up there. What are the defenses like? Is there a set of guards that go in there? I mean, the questions just keep coming. You're like, you've got a really cool setup here, and we're going to get rid of it all so that we can see Nynaeve and Lan hook up. Great job, guys. Great job. You know, and the next episode is the same thing. It's like, oh, you're going to tease me with a big battle, but you're just going to throw out this combination of Western civilization, Hadrian's Wall, Tolkien, and Chinese and Japanese warfare, and you're not going to explain any of this to me. You're only going to show a little bit of it, and instead show me Nynaeve, you know, with all, you know, I'm getting in the next episode. You're going to see how I'm going to be next episode, too. So, anyway, that was the good of the episode.
Wait till you see the ugly, folks.
Yeah. Well, here's the bad. The bad is the relationships between the actors. I don't believe this is always true, but I do believe in chemistry between people. It's just, you know, the best way I can sum it up, if you've never seen this movie, go out and watch a movie called 1776. It's a musical about the Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. And at one point, Ben Franklin and John Adams are frustrated because they can't get Thomas Jefferson to concentrate and write the Declaration. So they send for his wife. And this woman rushes up there, and Franklin and Jefferson are there, and they just start kissing. You know, and the great Ken Howard is playing Thomas Jefferson. And John Adams goes, I hope that's his wife. And Ben Franklin goes, of course it is. Look at the way they fit together. That's, you know, basically chemistry. You know, some people just fit together and some people don't. It doesn't always work that way, but most of the time it does, you know, and you can see it. Doesn't mean you're going to have a long-term relationship, but you can feel the chemistry and the heat and everything else between people. It's just not there. It's not there for any of the characters. To be honest with you, it wasn't even there in the lesbian relationship. Let's be honest. Did you feel any kindling, smoldering heat between those two actresses? I certainly did. So none of the relationships, you know, the character, the actresses or actress pairings here have any chemistry, anything that makes me invested. So even if I don't like what's going on, at least I'm like, well, okay, you know, so I'm going to watch this because of course I am, you know, it's like, and the best example I could give you of that is Kit Harington and his now wife from Game of Thrones. They had on-screen chemistry and ended up getting married, and they're, I assume, happily married, but they had it. So that's the bad. The ugly is all the other crap. All of it. All of it is bad. First of all, Nynaeve has this central role in this whole stupidity that's going on here, where people keep going back to her like she's the wisdom. Well, here's a piece of advice for everybody who hasn't tuned in and watched this. Anytime any person in this series, and specifically any woman with power in this series, proclaims to be wise, it's the exact opposite. They're unwise. They're stupid. They have no wisdom. None of them. Moraine doesn't have any wisdom. Amberly Seat doesn't have any wisdom. Nynaeve certainly has no wisdom. None of them have wisdom. The only person that had wisdom, she got blasted away in that cave by Logain, you know.
And the Gleeman.
Yeah. And the Gleeman. That's just true. This is true. The Gleeman have wisdom as well. but it's few and far between. Most of the time, these people are stupid. That's number one. Number two, so you've got Nynaeve, and she's got this, and people keep going back to her. And I'm like, why in the world are you going to her for anything? Has she done anything for you? What have you done? What have you done for me lately? You know, so nothing. Then let's get to the relationships. So let's start with the one that I hate the most, and then get to the one that frustrates me the most. I'm just going to, in descending order, and I'm going to go 3, and then I'm going to get out because I could rant for another 40 minutes on this. The first one is Lan and Nynaeve. I hate this. I hate it with a passion. I want to kill it. I want to stab it. I want to throw it in the fire and then dump it into the void to the 9th circle of hell. That's how much I hate it. It makes no sense. And not only that, that leads right into the second relationship, which isn't a relationship, but it is, because they've been together a long time, which is Lan and Moraine. Moraine, all of a sudden, Moraine is a user. I mean, just like Nynaeve's a user. She's going to be a great Aes Sedai because she's a user. She's a manipulator. Well, Moraine is as well. What in Moraine's character, especially as shown in this series, lends you to believe that she gives a damn about Lan's happiness and is going to do anything that is not going to inconvenience her or make her life more difficult or anything else? Nothing. So then that leads me to the relationships the most frustrating, which is Rand and Egwene. I want to take this boy by the ear. Like when he was saying, I've been waiting all this time for you to apologize. I was saying to the boy, it's like, boy, you better tell her she's going to be waiting a long time for her. She better settle in and get some slippers on and put her feet up and get some tea, because she's going to be waiting until the cows come home for an apology, because you don't owe her jack, and in that order, you know. But this boy, he is the poster child for just, well, all right, I'm male, I guess I got to apologize. It's like, dude, have some. I mean, you don't have to be toxic, you don't have to be a jackass about it, you don't have to be physical, but have some damn pride. Have some self-respect at some point, you know, and believe me, she'll respect you more for it. I mean, right. and that is the other thing about this. Here's another one. Egwene is a user. She'll make a great Aes Sedai. She's a manipulator. It's like, dude, if you really want to have a relationship with this woman, stand up for yourself and be a goddamn man. Excuse my language, but you know, it's like, be a man and don't be a jerk about it, but have some huevos, you know. So, so anyway, I'm done. Rant over. I got it out of my system.
Yeah, if a woman's got
from Dr. Nim.
if a woman's got no respect for you, you've got no chance.
The relationship is over. You don't have a relationship if you don't have respect for you. So, like, maybe Rand, being all that what he is, could grow a spine. Go ahead, Steve. Relationship drama.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of what I was going to say. So I'm going to go into some points that I really kind of want to get into, because Nynaeve is actually worse than what we've already discussed. It's interesting, DT, that you bring up Anakin being a stalker, because Nynaeve is one as well. And we see this. Oh, yeah. Because here Lan is like, okay, I'm going to go and see what passes for my adopted family over there. And who should come along but Nynaeve walking down the street? Oh, I just happened to be there. Oh yeah, like you weren't stalking Lan. And then after Lan closes the door, I mean, you know, pretty much it was like a good night sort of date night sort of thing. You know, he closes the door on her after going into his room, and then she follows him in. I'm like, who does this? It's like you know, it's like date is over. You have the nookie another time. No. No, she has to go and push this.
Somebody very entitled.
Just a quick
yes.
Here,
so when I say that you know that she is a total hypocrite when she talks about people not being things to be used or to be owned, she is a total hypocrite because she treats Lan like this.
I want DT to hit this after you're done, Steve. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
DT loves to talk about this. If we gender swap Nynaeve and Lan, what do we take?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, okay.
That would not be okay.
Go, Steve. I'm sorry. I had to put that
let
in there.
Steve finish, and
Yeah,
then I'll jump all in that.
Yeah, so Nynaeve is a stalker in addition to everything else bad that she is, which I totally agree on all points. I mean, she is insufferable. This is one of her worst episodes in an already really bad episode for Nynaeve. And that is really saying something. And then she goes on later on the next day, with Egwene about, oh, you care so much about all these people from the Two Rivers, like they're your children. I haven't seen her show jack squat of interest in any of the people that she's traveling with, really, unless it's to scold them. Moraine has acted more like a parent to these people than Nynaeve has. And you want us to act like Nynaeve is somehow acting like, oh, I'm the wisdom, really? No. And as Moraine said in the previous episode, you have no wisdom. Granted, nobody has any wisdom, but Nynaeve is like the least wise person in an already foolish group of people. And so when I say "Fly, You Fools" is the episode title for me, this is a large part of the reason why. It's just awful. That the whole and all for no reason, and all of this stuff not only takes away from Lan from going along with this stuff, because we have to have the Nookie this episode before the season finale, don't you know? And all of this is taking away from what is really interesting, which is two things: the Rand stuff, which we'll probably get into, and the stuff about Lan and about Faldara. Because I feel like there was such a missed opportunity here. You could have had a really good story, and how this could have been a really interesting story. Lan has come home for the first time in years. Don't you think that the king of Faldara might have use of land somewhere? Don't you think that he might, offer, hey, you have an Aes Sedai, and, you're a really great fighter, and I've known you since I was, yay high. Why don't you come and work for me? And, and we need all the people we can get to defend the gate. Can I count on your service? Or something that would give Lan a conflict of loyalties, so you would actually have a story. There is no story here. It's because Lan is acting as though, oh, nothing is holding me here. I had nothing until, Moraine came along. And clearly we see that's not entirely the case, because he goes and spends time with his family's armsman, who he regards as an adopted father. He has this whole adopted family and probably a bunch of other people from Malkir who survived with them, that he probably keeps in touch with, that are probably the closest thing he has to family at this point. Not to mention, he probably treats the royals of Faldara like their family as well. So there should be something resembling a conflict of interest and a conflict of loyalties that could have made a really great story. We don't get it. Go. What were you going to say?
I just realized something with you saying this. The overarching message of this show is that the women don't need no man, but all the men need a woman. If you look at all the male characters throughout here, they fall apart without a woman.
Well,
to the nth extent, with like Stepan even killing himself.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a good transition in what Nemesis asked me to talk about. Were you done, Steve, or did you have some more?
I was going to say, yeah, I have a little bit more. But I was going to say that particularly that, the only one who seems to not really have so much in that is Matt. And he's the one that everybody treats like he's a complete clown. Yeah. So, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so as Nemesis asked me to address, if we had gender flipped all this stuff that had happened, she's like, is that Lan and them house? Is Lan and them in there? I just happen to be in the neighborhood, so she's peeking through the window. Can a man peek through the window? I'm just asking a question. And then
did you ever see Superman Returns?
Right, and then Nynaeve.
How creepy was that?
Right, everyone. Right. Everyone, this is Nynaeve. And I'm like, okay. And then she goes in, but she slammed that door with the "we fixing to get it on" slam. That slam has a certain sound, like it's fitting to happen up in here. And if that had been a man walking in uninvited in any type of female space, talking about, yeah, it's fitting to happen.
Sir, can you come to HR and bring all the things in your office with you? And we've called the police for sexual assault.
Right.
Like whip out the rape whistle.
Right. Just straight up rape or whatever, that kind of thing. And then on top of all that, I want you to think how much of a creep you'd be if you invited yourself to a not even my girlfriend's dinner. You ain't even my girlfriend. But I'll just cruise down the street. Is that land in him? Okay. And then you just gonna come in. I like some biscuits and some cornture. Really? What would a female do if you did that? You'd be on the ground in handcuffs.
Well,
That's what.
Here's another one for you. Not only that, if Land's female and he's there with his family, and a male just walks in and starts like inserting himself into that, what do you think the family's going to do to that man? Son, you need to leave right now.
Right. You need to leave with the quickness.
Yeah.
And
what really gets me is everybody around them is saying, "Hey, 90, you're great for Land," and it's just, I mean, it's all of this is so forced. I mean, they want you to force this relationship on you, with absolutely nothing to justify it, and many reasons to detest it, and they keep giving you unintentional ones.
Yeah, and
she sure is beautiful.
Let's be clear for everyone out there. We are not gender swapping and contrasting this here to say that this behavior is acceptable for anyone. We're just trying to say that this behavior is not acceptable for anyone.
And there's something else that's been on my mind. Do these people have clothes like the Scooby-Doo gang? Because they wear the same clothes all the time, don't they? I'm like, do y'all wash them clothes? I'm just asking a question. So that's why the Blight is so big outside the city, because y'all don't need a shower. But anyway, sometimes, the relationship ain't right and it's forced, and we couldn't gender swap it and make it work in any kind of way. And Rand needs to grow a spine, a backbone, however you want to say it. But
or he needs to wear an ascot. It's one or the other. So
Freddie, that's right. And like you said, Moraine bounces back and forth between Land's partner and his lover and his bond person to maybe his mom, and I like her, the wisdom and all that, and he doesn't need your approval, just like you went off with your ambulance seat side chick.
Yeah,
in the magic door. You had to go through a magic door to hook up with your girlfriend.
I'll be honest with you, just from watching this series, if I had to characterize the relationship between Moraine and Land, I would think the Moraine treats Land like a dog.
Okay.
That's his.
It's kind of funny because that's exactly what Nynaeve called him early on. I expected you to be a lap dog.
Right. See, because I shouldn't go here because I'm not going to want to come back, but I'm going to just go and come back. When Clark was with Lana, they broke up, and then Lana hooked up with Lex. And then they played the same music for their hookup that they played with Clark and Lana. And then Lex forced Lana to marry him, and Lex faked the pregnancy. And then you know what Lana did? She cheated on Lex with Clark. And then when she got with Clark, she cheated on Clark with Lex. Said, I got to leave that alone. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if it's polyamory you're trying to push, that's one thing, but don't give us the most intense episode we had where a warder commits suicide because he literally cannot live without his Aes Sedai, and the bond is so crushing that to feel her life force going out drains the life out of him. Okay, y'all sold us that. And in the same story world, you're telling us that they got multiple hookups and they both got people on the side, and no. How about a big bite of no?
I just have one more thing that I wanted to throw in there because Steve really hit this on the head for me. Look, I'm not going to go on a huge rant again, but it's like I hate all these shows. I run from them. I hate The Bachelor. I hate The Bachelorette. I hate all that crap. It's like, look, if I want romance or romantic comedy, I'll watch one of those. If I watch romance, I'll throw on Hallmark Channel or something and watch that with my wife or whatever. But it's like, in a situation like this is a drama. I mean, there are stakes here. Come on now. We're arguing about this crap, right? I mean, it's just.
Well, especially since none of this was in the books. Yeah, none of this. They were all put in just to suck it up. Yeah, and it would have been far better if they had left it alone and addressed the storylines honestly the way that Jordan intended it.
And there are ways to do it that make sense. The relationship between Arwen and Aragorn is central throughout the Lord of the Rings, but it's done in such a way so that the romance and the complications and everything with Elrond and everything is handled so that it makes sense of what is going on. They
Mhm.
tried to put Dawson's Creek in the middle of the end of the world.
Well,
I mean,
see,
it's ludicrous.
They
the
went
thing
full
about
CW.
yes,
Yeah,
very
and you should never go full CW.
if you know anything about relationships, you know, and you're over the age of 13, which is key to what I'm fixing to say, you know that all you can have in the short term is infatuation. If something grows out of that and you build a deeper bond, it'll be because you go through stuff together and because you have enough of a common core to build a relationship on. All you have in the short term, which you can have with almost anybody, is infatuation. We buy that in high school because that's what life is like in that stage of life. You get a crush and you go crazy, and the next week you crushing on somebody else. We can buy that then, but in this context, it has, is what Steve just said, it doesn't even have a place in the story. Like you're shoehorning it in just to get it on the screen, because I guess a Game of Thrones envy, but in terms of the story you've been telling, it has no place in it, which leads me, is good segue into what we need to talk about obviously here, which is the discovery of the Dragon Reborn, which is Rand Thor, and a reminder that we saw his birth in the opening episode with his super mama, who could apparently fight off, you know, Vikings and tigers and bears, oh my, while in labor, but okay. So the thing about this discovery is, once again, I hate to keep using the same words, but it's underwhelming. Now I'm going to ask Steve in a minute, was Rand the actual Dragon Reborn in the books, or was this a change? So when I throw it to him, he's going to answer that. But I was underwhelmed, and here's the reason why. It's because y'all did that retro thing to where you replayed a scene, but there were some added elements on the replay that wasn't there the first time.
Yep.
So when Rand is doing the flashback in his mind, when he's facing the fact that he's a dragon and you've always known it's you, we see him using the one power. We see him channeling in previous scenes, like when he broke down the door, like when he's fighting, and all of a sudden now we see the swirl, and then the big revelation that in the waves, he actually, you know, just threw, he did like Scarlet Witch, man, he just threw some stuff and knocked the trolley back and all that, and it looked like it was naive, but it was really him. And I'm like, you can't casually throw some one power out like that and not know, okay? And we went through that whole thing with Logain. You know exactly who and what you are. If you didn't know you were the dragon, you know potentially were the dragon. And then it begs the question, how long have you been channeling? Did you hide that from Egwene? How could you hide that from Moraine? How long have you been doing this? Because you exhibited super strength, you exhibited telekinesis, you exhibited dreams and visions and prophetic knowledge. That didn't just happen today. So, you know, it was like y'all didn't earn this moment. You didn't set it up right. You didn't make it feel like it was this big thundering, oh my God, it's really kind of me thing. Y'all made it feel like, you know, it felt like a little bit of a retcon, you know, wink, wink. By the way, in the past, when he was doing his exploits, he was really channeling. Okay.
I got my thoughts on that too, but yeah, here we go.
So I was just like, I was underwhelmed, and I wanted to be whelmed, but I was underwhelmed because I was like, yeah, oh, I don't care like I should. And like we were talking about before, you got that kind of power and that kind of knowledge. And if you know that, why are you pining after this girl that clearly ain't thinking about you? Okay, this girl is not thinking about you. This girl has never been thinking about you. This girl is not impressed with you. She's more impressed with Perrin than she is with you. And also, Perrin might very much be a plan B. Now, it's entirely possible that when you're dating someone, they're setting up the person they're going to get with after y'all break up. That's entirely possible. That's what Egwene and Perrin feel like, which is why Egwene didn't say anything. Because what that means is, I don't want to admit that, yes, I have thought about it. I don't want to efface, I don't want to admit, I don't want to confess to anybody that I thought about it. But if me and Rand don't work out, I'm just saying, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. Was all on her face. And I'm like, how can you be the Dragon Reborn and you're not picking up on any truth going on? We don't have any context for your powers that you have had for a while. And it just, you know, and even going back to the first scene with your birth, it just lands with a thud. And I was quite surprised with how little I felt at the revelation. I was also quite surprised that it happened this soon. I thought it was going to happen maybe 2 or 3 seasons in, but they drop it now. I'm like, okay. So my response to that was like the first season of The Flash. Y'all burning through stories so fast. I didn't think we were going to find out who Thawne was in the first season. But I'm like, y'all burning through stories so fast. I hope you got some story left to tell in the subsequent seasons. And that's how I feel now with this revelation. I'm like, hope there's some more story to tell, since, you know, because I thought this was going to be the big mystery that was going to stretch out like 5 seasons, and we find out 5 seasons in. But nope, we know now. And I'm like, okay, I should feel. And then y'all sneak off. And once again, I'm going to throw it to Steve so we can get book perspective. More, you know, so it's the morning after. Nynaeve comes in with the nookie phase. I did have some nookie. And Egwene is like, I see that nookie face. You ain't fooling me. You've been somewhere. According to this, you know, perfectly made bed. You spent the night somewhere. She's like, oh, I couldn't sleep because you needed some nookie. So we're going through that whole thing. And then they're chasing around after everybody. And then, like, Rand is like, it's me. And Moraine is like, dun, 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 and then they just leave. I said, wait just a second. Are you saying you did that to try to spare the other people's lives because you know if they come with you, they're going to die because you knew that was going to happen? Or are you saying that you got so much confidence now in this revelation that, like, what? You know, like, because there was no conversation from Moraine about the madness that men get. Not even a thought of, you know, what's your mental and emotional kind of state, whatever. Just, okay, we need to go meet the Dark One. And I was like, so if Anna said it 10 times in this pod, but everything that they say continues to contradict everything that they've shown before. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Steve and give us some book background on, was it Rand in the books? And how did you feel when the show reveals him?
Yes, he was. That was always the idea. Rand was always the Dragon Reborn from the beginning. That was always the plan. I would have been disappointed if it wasn't Rand for a number of reasons. Especially if it had been like Egwene or somebody like that. It's just like, come on, don't do that.
Or Nynaeve.
Yeah, or Nynaeve. Yeah, if it had been Nynaeve, the heads would have been rolling. Heads would have been rolling. So, you know, the fact that I didn't, like, completely erupt ought to tell you something. So, like, give them points for getting something right. Because the problem really isn't that they gave Rand the Dragon Reborn or that they did it here. And they got plenty of story. I mean, they got another 13 books. So I'm not of mind of, like, doorstopper 800 to 1,000 page novels. They got plenty of material. I'm not worried about that. What I didn't like was the execution of this scene. Because honestly, I mean, it's explained so poorly. To the point where you have to, as we were talking about with the Black Wind scene, you have to go back and rewatch it like several times to understand anything. Because one of my questions was, how did Rand, you know, suddenly decide right then and there that he's the Dragon Reborn? I mean, what gave him that idea? Okay, so apparently it was something that the Black Wind had told him. Okay, why are you believing the Black Wind? First of all, But second of all, I really get the feeling that this version of Rand is in denial or has been in denial. Like he is the Dragon Reborn, but doesn't want to admit it to himself. Like he knows he has this ability. He wants to be normal and live a normal life with Egwene so much that he doesn't want to acknowledge that he can channel, that he doesn't want to admit to anybody that he is the Dragon Reborn, because if that comes out, his life and his dreams are over. You know, he's going to be on the run from the Aes Sedai. You know, he's got this destiny that he doesn't really want. You know, so and that he's basically saddled with and stuck with. And he wants to get away from that. So what's the easiest way of getting out of it? Don't admit it. But the pattern has a way of catching up with you, and which is fair, but not the way that they did it. Because we're not seeing the leaps in Rand's head to how he finally either realizes that he's a Dragon Reborn, or cuts through his layers of denial and finally acknowledges, okay, there might be something to this, and maybe I'm this guy after all. But we just don't see that process in a way that's coherent, because some of it we don't get it we don't get it. For example, that it's the Black Wind speaking to him that gave him the idea. So okay, he goes and talks to Min about this, and goes through the whole fortune teller thing, and her relationship with him is another thing that's going to be down the road that I'm not even going to get into right now, but because that's a whole nother game of worms. But yeah, so he goes and gets this thing from Min, and she seems to be non-committal about it. Like she doesn't want to tell him what she's really seeing, and she's playing this game with him. And oh, do you really want to know what I really see? Have a beer and go home. It's just and okay, and he accepts this. Why? I have no idea. And everything just feels like just sort of forced because they know he has to know that he's the Dragon Reborn at the end of the episode. And, we just have to kind of flip the light switch on in his head and a plot convenient moment so that he goes to Moraine, and then the two of them go off together to, to deal with the crack of doom, as it were. I mean, it's so forced. It doesn't make any sense. And never mind the stuff with Rand, Perrin, and Egwene, which I had forgotten to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, and I agree with the whole thing is so stupid. And part of the reason that it's so stupid is the wife never existed in the books. This was an invention. There was no love triangle. This is completely just thrown out of nowhere for CW style drama. There was nothing to any of it. Maybe somebody realized, halfway along, oh, gee, these actors really seem to have chemistry. Maybe we can tease that there's a ship there. And so you get this whole thing, but I'm not even really convinced that Egwene feels anything for Perrin beyond like a really close friendship or like a brother-sister dynamic. Perrin might on some level have feelings for her, and maybe that's why the Black Wind was whispering the thing into his ear, but I don't think he seriously had anything for Egwene, or at least nothing that he's willing to acknowledge. I think that this version of Perrin was all about his wife, and he's just trying to alleviate his guilt, and whatever feelings he might have for Egwene is just mixed in with his guilt, and he's punishing himself.
It's emotional rebound.
Right. Right. So that's what I think is really going on with that, but it's really, really stupid. But the fact remains, it's like, okay, they're getting to where they need to go. They're taking bits from the book that they should be taking, but as we've seen with the prologue, the way that they get there is like the worst way possible, and it's one of those that you can't even make sense of unless you stop, rewind a couple times, to see the full context and try to grasp, what is going through Rand's mind. We don't even see like all the clues coming together, like why Loyal thinks he's an Aielman. Well, that's because his parents were Aiel, but none of that comes through. It's just okay. Yeah. Oh, I seem to remember this place from before. Oh, I must be the Dragon Reborn. I don't think that's as compelling as being able to break through a door, using the one power, but that's just me. So it's like all the wrong clues, everything, that is just sort of put together in this montage that is not really coherent or consistent. It's just, yeah. And I have to say, yes, it is underwhelming. But it's, not because of the way the story did it originally that it was doing that. It's the way that the showrunner have really been dropping the ball consistently. And it's the same way because we've seen in previous episodes and in previous cases. And it is this way here. And it's really a mess.
All right. So, in conclusion, as we have been set
Can I
up.
just add a point real quick?
Go ahead.
I agree with everything Steve said, but I'm gonna, I've hit the casting director, I've hit the story. Now I'm gonna hit the writers here. They're trying to do a reluctant hero story, but to do a reluctant hero story, you have to set that up and show the hero being reluctant all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Then they brought the Oracle from the Matrix in to the movie, and then they broke the Fellowship of the Ring. But because we've never seen the reluctant hero, and there's no way anybody would confuse the loyalty of Samwise with whatever Moraine is, it just falls flat. And so the writing is really bad. It's really bad.
Which is unfortunate because it's a very rich story world. Even without having read the books, there's so much here that could be worked with because, for example, Moraine's quick reaction to Rand just kind of busting on the scene and saying, "It's me. How do you know? Are you sure?" How long have you known? Are you sure this isn't a deception from the Black Wind? Just no question. Just, okay, we're out. So that leads us as into a setup for, the season 1 finale. And, I'm not going to give it away here because I have seen it. But again, I'll just say I was surprised. I was surprised by this episode, and I was surprised by next episode because, and then, is there a central character? Is it Moraine? At first it was, but then the camera keeps pulling back and we keep getting like this side stuff. Does the focus now shift to Rand, or was it Egwene all along? Is there a central character? There's a central drive. But now that question has been answered, my gut reaction when I first saw it was, what's the point of the show now? Now, I get it that you got to face, the Dark One and make a choice. But if that all happens quickly, then you're going to have to reset a premise. And that's the same way I felt after the first season of The Flash. And The Flash has struggled after his first season because Barry said in the opening, my name is Barry Allen. I'm the fastest man alive. When I was little, a man in yellow killed my mother, and I've dedicated my life to finding blah, 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 blah. He said that every episode until we got the episode where Thawne was revealed. So I'm like, what's the show going to be about now? You've satisfied your narrative drive very, very quickly. And that's the way I felt after this episode. I'm like, I'm not interested in nothing else y'all got going on now that we know who the dragon is. Because now the only question left to answer is, what is his decision in the face of the Dark One? That's been the thing all along. And all this other stuff is not even filler. Okay? It doesn't rise to the level of filler. It's just annoying. So I'm saying all that to say, to put it plainly, I wish I was more excited about the finale than I am, because I'm not really excited at all. The first time I saw it, I wasn't really excited. I was just like, okay, because again, when you have such a major revelation that's been the driving force behind the whole season, that means without question, next season, you're going to have to start with a new premise. You're going to have to start with an entirely new premise. And there's no guarantee that's going to be as interesting as opposed to a show like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad sets up the premise within the first 15 minutes or the first quarter reel of what it does.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does with excellence that makes it stand out is we see Walter White break bad in stages over the course of the seasons until he is like Victor Von Doom at the end. Like, he goes from this nerdy guy who's trying to find his confidence, who's standing on the highway in his drawers, trying to talk his way out of situations, to someone who really is a threat. And the power of that show was us watching him morph into that threat. I feel like there's no chance of that here. I feel like there's no 5 seasons from now. I feel like each season is going to be a different show. I could be wrong. And I know, it has multiple stuff going on in the books, and Steve can attest to that. But still, I'm just talking about from a show perspective. And I think the show is going to lose a lot of its audience. The only way that's going to be different, and I'm going to talk about that some more next week, is that the first episode of season 2 has to be killer. It has to start with a bang. It's got to grab our attention. It's got to introduce some new information. It's got to hook us, and it's got to hook us hard from the jump. Otherwise, I already feel the law of diminishing returns kicking in. Now, I could be overblowing it. I could be overstating it, but that's just how I feel in my gut. So let me hear you guys' closing thoughts. Start with Bracy.
Rushed. On top of everything else I said about knowing where the plot beats are coming in and the plot contrivance, this is rushed because the last episode is coming up next. I'm with UDT. This is a 1,000-page book. It's always a good idea to do such a thing as a series and not a movie. But when you've got such a grand story, you need to do it as a series of movies, or in this case, a series of series. This really needed either 3 seasons or maybe more, 5 seasons, like you said, or a 22 season like regular network TV sort of thing, because it's just too much. Because it all right here at the end is getting far too condensed. The world building gets fractured, and we just don't get to see things progress as they should have. It all gets jammed together. It all gets muddled because of that. And a show that started off with a lot of promise is really ending with a whimper instead of a bang.
All right, Nim, his final thoughts.
We've compared this show a lot over the last 7 episodes to Game of Thrones and also to Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. And I think that's a fair comparison. Leaving off Game of Thrones, the fiction, the book version, because it'll never be finished probably. The problem with this series and not the book by Jordan is that the whole point of this is what is lurking in the background the whole time, which is the evil, the dark one, and the fight to come up with the power and everything else that goes with it. All the other stuff is window dressing or a way to show the human struggles getting there. This whole season so far gave us a little bit of the evil one at the beginning and then focused on trivialities, fripperies, Dawson's Creek crap, all of the things that were least important. Even when we did see darkness actually consume one of the characters, Matt. Matt was written off the show, and the dagger was discarded and never gone back to again. So we've never really established what is going on and why we care and why the evil, it's like they're telling us, but they never showed us. So
now that's a really good point. I'll say this before I throw it to Steve. One of the things you have to do is you have to keep your antagonists and protagonists either in the same space, or you have to keep them connected in some way. When you study Empire Strikes Back, we see from the beginning that Vader is chasing Luke. And so he keeps getting within like 3 feet of him, but he doesn't quite get him. And so by the time they meet in Cloud City, that tension has been building. And so that's why all the revelations, everything that happened in that scene is so powerful, because we know that Vader has been chasing him in an obsessive kind of way. He talks to the Emperor about him, and the Emperor is like, we got to kill him. And Vader's like, but what if he could be turned? And, it kind of changes his mind. And, and so by the time they meet up, we know that Vader has been on that path all movie long. Here, we've seen glimpses of the Dark One, but the conflict is supposed to be between what the Dragon Reborn is going to do when face to face with the Dark One, and his choice is going to make or break the world, literally. I had more fun watching Logain than anything I've had so far. Go ahead, Steve. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I can see where you guys are coming from, particularly with the way that this show has handled things. The real problem, I feel, is less that there's too much in the books and more that this show is totally inept at time management. It is completely inept at knowing where the camera is going. So, you miss details that are important. You focus on things that are trivial and don't matter in the scheme of things. You get wasted scenes and wasted time focused on characters that we don't like, relationships we don't care about, and less on the interesting things, the world building, the actual character conflicts that they should be facing, all of these things. This is what disappoints me, is that we really haven't seen this. And you see complete poor pacing at times as well. And all of this is contributing to a narrative that is weaker than what it should have been. And this is amazing, which is amazing to me, because Jordan isn't exactly the best paced author in the world. I mean, you could skip entire chapters of Jordan and miss very little. And Jordan, I feel, is better than what we have seen in the show, because at least Jordan, when he's good, when he focuses on the things that work in the world building, in the concepts, there's stuff there. I will say, as far as season 2, I'm hoping for a couple of things. We've already seen one at the end of season 1, which is the Shan Shan. Those are the guys in the boats that you're going to see at the end of episode 8. Those guys are pretty nasty customers. We're probably going to see the Great Hunt. So I think you're going to see like some of the Arthurian type of stuff elsewhere in the world, which is interesting. And then but what I really, really want to see are the Forsaken, which are the Dark One's chief lieutenants. Those, because I want to see like a major important villain face off against Rand. Somebody that usually has the ability, to make him tremble a little bit and to force Rand to have to kind of work. In terms of his character conflict, I think the question then becomes, how does he deal with the madness? He has a power that he can't use very often out of fear that he is going to surrender to the madness and become the breaker of the world if he uses it too much. So a lot of it is having to learn with, okay, how do I cope with having this power? How do I, deal with the madness? How much of this power should I use? But I have the power to make life better for people. Should I just focus on that and, damn the torpedoes, as it were? So these are the questions that I kind of want to see Rand wrestle with. The focus is on Rand. I think he should always be the main central hero of the piece. He is the man of prophecy. He is the chosen one. He is the one who is destined to defeat the Dark One in the last battle. I'm hoping that we actually see the last battle. This is one of the problems I've had with Jordan as well, because I want to see that big, cataclysmic fight between good and evil, that settles the fate of the world. I feel like we need this. However the show ends, it should end with that. But the way that it's been handled, if it's like this season, if we're going to start seeing things where we're focusing on relationships that we're not in the books, relationships that don't matter at all, having sexy time, distracting away from the important parts of the story, away from what Jordan contributed in the complex world building and characters like Em and Valda and Logain. I want to see those kinds of characters again. I want to see Tom Maryland come back. I want to see all of this, except elevated, to the next level as we see, the Dark One start to, basically increase his forces and strengthen his own positions. I want to see all that. I want to see the battle between both sides build. And I want to see Rand get caught between all these different factions as they find out what he is. And how is he going to survive that? All of these could be really interesting stories, but if it's done the way that we saw in this episode, I fear for the future. I'm hoping that we start to see, stronger level storytelling, strong level time management, and a strong level pacing, and just, and hopefully they get a Matt Cawthon for season 2 that doesn't lose the edge that we saw with this season. Because if Matt ends up being a bad casting, like say Egwene, I think we're also in for problems there. So I am hopeful that they can turn this around, but I see real areas where if they're not careful, this could fall apart, and I hope we don't see that, because I want this to be good. I like the world and I like the story, but they need to really focus on the right things and not screw up the way that they screwed up with season 1.
Well, Steve, you just pointed something out, and that is that you summed it up really well, but that is that the larger story has been the larger conflict that's coming and the choice that the Dragon Reborn has to make. And right before we launch into that, we get a bunch of snippets about relationships that don't matter. So they made the focus of the camera very small. It's a very narrow, small, tight kind of shot story-wise. And then you're going to try to pull it. Now, if you want to know how to pull that off better, Star Wars did it better. Star Wars, the first movie, was about the galactic conflict and the two sides. Empire made it be about the Skywalkers. And we've never gotten off the Skywalkers since then, but Empire is what narrowed the focus to one family. Jedi pulls it back again when Luke is in the Emperor's throne room and they're looking at the battle over Endor, and you get a sense of what's going on out there is reflected to what's going on in here. That's the way you have both a personal story and keep a hold of the larger conflict. And that's not what's happening here at all. We got a couple glimpses of the Dark One, and he showed up like the boogeyman, and then we haven't seen him in a while.
I know we're about to go, but the last thing I would say, because I did focus on the writing, is that when you do stuff like this, when you adapt a work, you need to boil that work down to the kernel. What is the essence of the story? How much time do I have to tell the story, and then fill the time you have up with that story, and then add other stuff in afterwards. But if you don't tell the story, you're going to fail, period.
The story is Dawson loved Joey his whole life, and she picked Pacey. Stuff got
Good
to
sex,
burn.
bad luck.
That's right. All right, and on that note, we're going to end this episode of Wheels Creek, but we'll be back next week for the finale episode. Thanks so much to my co-hosts. You guys are always great. Thanks so much, Steve.
Oh, thanks. It's always fun to talk about this series, like warts and all, even when we have to give them lashes for messing things up like they did this episode. I mean, but I still enjoy, what they've been trying to do. And when the show is on the right path, I do enjoy it. I'm just hoping that we can get back to that and no more episodes like this.
Thanks so much to director Jeff, because Jeff knows the ins and outs of every shot.
It's always a pleasure to be here. We'll see how it goes next week. This episode was a real low point for me. So hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst.
And my fellow David is triggered like I am. Thank you so much, David, the triggered nemesis.
Well, thank you for allowing me to get out of my system. My blood pressure went down about 40 points. And I'm just frustrated because this isn't Token and all the great story there. And it isn't Game of Thrones with all the violence, debauchery, and just pure, nudity that happens in HBO shows. So it's like, I can't depend on either one. I don't need that, but it's like, if you're not going to give me story, at least give me that. But they don't. So.
All right, y'all. That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out the other YouTube channels we have on Comic Crusaders and United Capes Podcast Network. We have a lot of good content out there. If you like retro stuff, more contemporary stuff, lots of good interviews with great artists and writers.
Check out Cinema Crusaders on Friday. We're talking Dune 1984.
That's right. Great works from the past, classic writers and artists and up-and-coming ones. So we have a lot of content, so be sure to check that out. And this crew will see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.
Spoilers.